안녕하세요. 저는 루나예요. I hope everyone's okay, and I'm just here to review the Korean from 01 book. I'm so sorry, my voice is a bit croaky because I have a bad throat, but then I was like, oh my gosh, I never upload anymore, what's wrong with me? So while I had free time, despite being ill, I'm still doing this review for you because I love you guys. Yay! So I have reviewed other from 0 books, and they were the Japanese from 0 books, and I own 1, 2, and 3. However, I've only reviewed number 1 because I haven't worked through 2 and 3 yet. So I think it's a bit unfair to review those without actually knowing everything about it. If you've seen my review on the Japanese from 01, then you'll see that this book is very similar. There's not many differences at all, actually, and that's one thing I like because I really like the structure. The difference is, though, that with the Japanese from 01, it teaches you little bits of hiragana every lesson. So there's 5 new characters of hiragana that you learn every single lesson. If you really don't know anything about Japanese and are only interested in Korean, that's one of their alphabets. So you learn little pieces of their alphabet at a time. However, when it comes to Hangul, the Korean alphabet here, they teach you everything you need to know about Hangul before you start. And then as soon as you start learning, everything will be in Hangul. When it came to Japanese, it would replace the romanized letters with the hiragana, which I find to be a lot more confusing than just teaching everything in the beginning and then applying that knowledge later in the book. That way you don't have to think in 2 completely different alphabets while you're reading, which really does hurt the brain. In the first page, you can see it tells you about Hanja and Hangul, and it tells you the difference and it tells you why you learn it. This is a really important page, I think, because it really just shows you why you need to learn these. And I know it's not the most fun thing in the world to learn at first, but it's actually pretty cool to be able to read this alphabet. In the page next to that, it actually shows you every single thing you need to learn in Hangul. So obviously there's rule changes that it will talk you through later. However, it basically teaches you all the sounds you need to know in Hangul, and it will give you a romanized version underneath and then the symbol on top. And it will tell you about the rules of making blocks in Hangul, which are really useful to know, and what way to read it and how to draw it. It also shows you later about different fonts, but I'll show you that when I come to it. I think this is a really nice ordered grid. However, be careful with the romanized words because I find them to be quite confusing and not very accurate. It gives you loads and loads of practice space. This is the first one, so obviously as you can see my Hangul is really neat, but it gives you loads of random words to practice with, especially Hangul you just finished learning, which I think is pretty cool. Here's an example of different fonts. As you can see, there's a written font, a font, and a font, and it shows you kind of how people do these things and how it will look like in handwriting. I find this to be so important, guys, because when I'm with my Korean teacher in school and she writes me something on a piece of paper, I sometimes can't read her writing, so it's nice to see how some people write it and how there's a different font to it depending on who writes it or where you'll see it written, which is always really helpful. There's quite a few matchups, which I think is cool. I love matching up. I think it's just a fun activity to do, and it's cool that this book is full of activities like this, you know. It's just not just copy this, but there's loads of fun and games in it, which I think is kind of enticing and entertaining. The book is going to give you tips, which I think is really cool. So here it teaches you about double vowels, and I got really confused about these when I started, but it really explains it really well, and you start seeing a pattern, and it makes you repeat your knowledge over and over until it sticks in your long-term memory. Another thing that I find really useful is that it teaches you how to type in Hangul. Now, you'll notice that if you don't have a Korean keyboard, you won't actually know where to press. And you can buy stickers. If you want to know a good place to buy them, obviously I found them on Amazon, so I'll send you a link for that below if you're interested in buying some Hangul stickers. However, if you don't have them, then this book actually shows you different exercises on how to type in Hangul, and then you just start remembering. In the next page it gives you random words to type and practice using so you can write proper blocks in Hangul on your computer. I personally find it a lot easier to write on your phone when you set it in your language settings, so sometimes I use it on my phone more often. However, it's always really important to know how to type in Hangul on your computer because you never know when you use it. Plus, if you go to Korea now, you're more likely to type to people when it comes to writing letters than you are on handwriting, so it's really important to be able to write. I think it's a really important skill to learn that the book actually teaches you. And it tells you about sound changing rules, and there's loads of pages on this, which I think is so important, guys, because sometimes you read Hangul and the sound is completely different to what it should be when you first read it. So there are some rules that change the sounds of the endings, and if you read it wrong it becomes a completely different word, and you don't want to fall into that trap. So this book teaches you. However, you don't have to remember it from the first few pages. If you don't remember what are on these pages, it will give you a little note to remind you while you're reading, so don't feel bad if you can't memorize this straight away. If you're really eager to go learn after just reading this once, it will remind you later in the book, which I think is a great option. And finally, after that, you get to go to lessons! Woo! I skipped a few pages, so there's about 30 pages before you start doing vocabulary. However, it tells you 20 starter phrases for lesson 1, and it tells you the aims and what you're going to be learning in this lesson. Before I was really comfortable with Hangul, I could read it, but really slowly, so I thought I would romanize them, and you can do that. It does say in the beginning of the book to write all over the book, so you can. It doesn't seep in through other pages. No, it doesn't come with any romanization. That's why it comes with notes for when things are pronounced different ways. This is how the notes look like. So there's a sound change somewhere there, and it'll tell you why in the little bubble. However, if you do want to romanize them for the first 2 words, that's normal. Don't feel guilty that you can't read it perfectly. That's just something really normal to do. However, if you are that good at Hangul by the time you get this book, then great, don't do this. Just read your Hangul, because everything from now on is in Hangul. Between each lesson, there will be gaps like this to put in extra words you either want to practice more from the lesson, or some words that you've learned outside of the lesson that are very similar to what you learned in the lesson, so then you can practice them here, writing the Korean next to the K and the English next to the E. And it's a good way to write notes about words that you want to remember, rather than having to get a completely separate book. You can also have it here and read it back whenever you want. Vocabulary is structured like this in grids, especially with numbers. This is the first thing you learned in the Japanese from Zero Book 2. There's the numbers, and then obviously it will tell you them in English, which here is just romanized numbers, I guess. Then it'll be the written, and then it will tell you what it sounds like, just in case there are any sound changing rules. I'm sorry, I'm not very steady with my hand. Of course, I romanized it too in the beginning because it was too hard, but hey ho, if you're good, you don't need to do it. Exactly the same page that was in the Japanese book. The same vocabulary that you're going to learn in the Japanese book 1, you will learn in this book 2. Do you remember this page from it if you've seen that review? Obviously, if you haven't, you wouldn't. But exactly the same pages and exactly the same exercises, just in Korean sometimes. It's up to you to decide if that's a bit of a copy to this book, and if it's a bit of a cheat, or if it's actually helpful that it's following the same structure to people who are studying both. It tells you about stemming verbs, and it tells you a lot about grammar in this book. So it's really good that it covers vocabulary and grammar. In the back it does say that it includes bilingual glossaries and an integrated workbook. It's easy to understand grammar, and it's designed for self-study. However, unlike the Japanese from Zero book, it doesn't tell you that it teaches you 800 words of vocabulary, so I'm not sure how many words of vocabulary you actually learn in this book. All in all, in this book you'll learn so much, from countries or places to foods, to body parts, to numbers, to months, to weeks, to the basic introductions, to tips on how to bow, to tips on greeting people and being polite and not being polite. You'll learn quite a lot of vocabulary, and book 2 has just come out recently, so I might be getting that one next. Obviously I still have to finish this book, there's still a lot to learn in this book. I haven't been able to study Korean or Japanese as often as I'd like because I have too many exams recently, which is so sad, but that's life. So hopefully after I finish them I can go back to studying really hard and reviewing more books for you guys. All in all, if I was to give this book a rating, I would give it a 4 out of 5. The reason why I wouldn't give it a 5 is because there's obviously a few things that drag, a few things that are copied, and there's no colour in the book, which I guess isn't important, but I'm just a colourful person. But out of that, the content's amazing, and me giving it a 4 out of 5 is just me being ultra picky, because if you weren't a picky person this would be like a 5.5 out of 5, which is impossible, but I'll still give it anyway. What a great learning aid. I really do recommend this book for ultra beginners, and please try it out. I mean, it's so helpful. I love this book, and I started using it when I knew like zilch, zero, minute Korean, and this is all I'm learning from, basically. Obviously I've got my friends and my teacher, but this is what I learn in the most part of the time. I have got other Korean books I will be reviewing soon, so stay tuned to see more about those. Have a great time, guys. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will link in the description this book on Amazon, which is where I purchased it myself. That's all, and annyeong!